So this comes from businessinsider.com. And, Darren, I don't know if you've read Business Insider for a while, but I've read it for a long time, and definitely grabby headlines. They're just doing the right job for themselves, that's for sure.
Right.
So here we are. Oops, hold on. Take off that Bluetooth. There we go. Okay, it states the housing market's ice age. If you don't already own a home, you're going to be screwed for years to come. Wow. And there it is. The market turned upside down. Let's see here. Attempting to time the housing market is a foolish pursuit. Sure, there are heaps of data, forecasts, and market experts who can offer theories on where home prices or borrowing rates are headed. But no amount of tea leaf reading can spare you from this harsh reality. Home buying is ultimately a coin toss. If you're very lucky, you buy a home right before prices boom. If you're not so fortunate, you pony up the cash just in time for the bubble to burst. While these breaking points are nearly impossible to see in advance, they're often glaring in hindsight. Perhaps the most shocking before and after for the housing market in recent memory, the moment when the fortunes of home buyers diverged, creating what one expert called a, quote, housing economy of haves and have-nots, came in July 2020. That's when it became clear that a wave of house-hungry millennials and space-starved remote workers were turning the housing market's initial pandemic slump into a full-blown frenzy. The differences between those who bought homes before and after that turning point are staggering. People who got in before things went haywire were able to dodge skyrocketing home prices, lock in low record mortgage rates, and stack hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity over the past few years. Meanwhile, people left on the sidelines have watched their rent costs eat into their down payment nest eggs. Median home prices soar by 30%, a mortgage rate shot back up, and the pool of available homes shrink to the lowest levels in recent history. The result is a housing market that's fundamentally out of whack. With each passing month, more millennials and now Gen Zers reach the points in their lives where they feel the urge to settle down and buy a home. Yet the number of available homes remains shockingly low, especially during what would normally be a busy spring selling season. On the horizon, there's no flood of new homes that could significantly ease the housing crunch, and homeowners have little incentive to move, since doing so would mean giving up the comfortable low mortgage rates that guarantee them manageable home payments for decades to come. The housing market has changed for good, and with the benefit of time-earned wisdom, we can pinpoint the moment it entered a new era. If July 2020 was the make-or-break moment for the market, we may now be seeing the crystallized new normal, a fraught landscape defined by a scarcity of available homes, borrowing rates that have sharply rebounded from their historic lows, and homeowners who feel locked in by the deals they scored earlier in the pandemic. Call it the housing ice age. And then I'll just skip down to the bottom here. I think the final paragraph kind of sums it all up. I will put this URL in the comments, though, if you want to read it yourself. Let's see. For those who missed out on the past several years of wealth building, the long-term effects could be devastating. We already know that millennials are living with their parents later, delaying typical life milestones, such as getting married or having children, and having to wait longer to purchase homes. As a result, they have less wealth than their predecessors did, even though their earnings have caught up to those of previous generations. The steep rise in mortgage rates last year ensured that there would be a decades-long gap between those who secured cheap rates earlier in the pandemic and those who will be forced to contend with all kinds of rising housing costs in the coming years. The thing that I think is maybe not changing is the fact that we have people who are in homes now who are locked in for 30 years. Simonson told me. If I've got a 30-year mortgage, I don't ever have to sell that house. Those are generational changes. There you go.
Yeah. So the reason, one of the main reasons we chose this article was to talk about the new norm of low inventory. And I think that's real. Which means it's going to maintain its competitiveness. There's not going to be any massive shift where inventory is going to blow up all of a sudden. And, rates. We spoke about that a moment ago. Rates aren't going to go dramatically down anytime soon.
Right.
inflation has helped wages rise, which is something they mentioned in the article, and that's relevant. It also talks about continued rising prices. That
Mhm.
you may have lost out, prices will continue to rise. Well, have you lost out? If they continue to rise, maybe you've lost out on the past 3 years of gains. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean there won't be future gains. Um, Always comes down to personal situation. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
But in articles like this, the one negative about this one, and it was certainly packed with them, they have
You're right.
a lot of adjectives
Right.
that very clearly reveal the writer's position and opinions. I would venture to say this writer I may not own a house and is
Mm.
upset about it, and that comes
Yeah.
out in their choice of adjectives as they write.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, with that said, I think it's important to understand there's volatility out there. Rates may move, uh, but the new low inventory is a real adjustment for people to accept,
Mm.
um, and to try to navigate that low inventory rather than waiting, which is the alternative that many buyers are kind of in that bubble right now, the waiting
Right.
bubble. We've done the
Right.
talked about the game of chicken, who's going to break first and who's going to move, who's going to adapt. There's nothing worse than waiting, just for waiting. Sometimes you might not like an answer of
Mm.
a direction something's moving in,
Right.
or but at least you have an answer. You can make a decision and you can move forward or step
Yeah.
back. But that neutral zone is just kind of crappy.
Yeah.
So this is why we wanted to bring this up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
the game
Well,
of
these are,
waiting. Yeah, not great.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, these are all things that we've talked about in the past, singly
Yeah.
and in group. But yeah, that is a positive, right? That there is a reality here. Accept the reality, make your adjustments, adapt, and move on, and go on either with the rest of your life, or maybe that 2,000 square foot house is now a 1,300 square foot house. I don't know,
Right. Or maybe you move to
but
Lancaster
or yeah,
for a better
Lancaster,
price,
Texas, right?
or
That's
another
Lancaster.
state, or
Yeah.
sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think we've seen the pattern long enough. I think this article is timely, because you're right. We've said all of these things over time in various articles, but it's been consistently out there at this point.
Yeah.
Everything. Well, from an outsider's perspective, there's no reason prices should be where they are. But when you start getting granular with it, when you talk about rates that owners have, when you talk
Yeah.
about low inventory, when you talk about trying to hedge inflation, all these components in the labor market are really lined up to keep it the way it is. And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to point out. There's
Yeah.
no real big changes coming anytime soon.
All right. Well, there you go. So, everyone's situation is different. Perceptions are different. The more solidly you get in reality, the better conversations we can have with you or your agent and your lender, obviously, to see that, it makes sense. And that was kind of my final point. I think I said to you, Darren, is like, if anything, this is telling buyers and sellers, they need a really good team around them, truly, to figure things out. If they don't now, just forget about it. It's not going to be your cousin or your brother's sister who's a real estate agent who is going to just make it happen. You really need good people.
Hey, I'm somebody's brother's sister, and that's okay in that situation, man. But no, quality matters, for
Yeah.
sure. And the pool of realtors is being weeded out already.
Yeah.
It's happening, and it will continue to happen. So typically in those scenarios, the realtors that are remaining are those who are a little better at their job,
Yeah.
and maybe have a little more knowledge and can navigate the process.
Right. Solutions. They're
Yeah.
solutions people.